Here's the question. How do you recommend a game? Allow me to set the stage a bit. The inspiration for this piece was Jacob Geller's video, The Future of Writing About Games, which I know my prof has watched because he assigned it and this video project for class, and if you happen to find this uploaded to YouTube, you've probably seen it already. For the fringe cases in the crowd, the video is a brief overview of games writing, both of the quality and quantity variety, and what kind of writing Geller looks for and hopes others seek out as well. Geller stresses that point at the end of the video, but it's also implicitly made in the video existing at all. Videos are hard to make, especially ones like Geller's that are extensively edited, rigorously referenced, and intimately introspective. That last one is hard, I can speak from experience, or at least hard to translate into something you're reasonably sure someone who isn't you can understand. But that other person is the point of the video. Why would you go to all that effort if what you wanted to say didn't need someone to hear it? As Geller details in his video, for the majority of games journalism as a profession, the main thing people have wanted to say and hear about games is whether said games are good or bad, preferably with a number at the end to quantify and compare to other games. That's still very much the bulk of modern professional games journalism, and I would make the argument this bled over into the YouTube review show era and even the early video essay scene. These all have a reason to exist. I watch and read a lot of these either because I find the creators entertaining or the subject is something I'm interested in but want a trusted second opinion on before I give it money. For example, I might be looking through the deals section of the Switch eShop and find something I've never heard of but looks interesting, and go check Nintendo Life to see if they've covered it. And after skimming the article to confirm there's no technical issues and seeing a nice 7 out of 10 at the bottom, I press the purchase button. And that's how I ended up with Far Lone Sales installed on my Nintendo Switch. Far Lone Sales is a 2018 puzzle platformer developed by Okamotive, a developer based in Zurich, Switzerland. You play as this little guy in a red raincoat and try to make your way through a post-apocalyptic world in your diesel punk RV. You can move left and right, jump, and pick up objects. Using these abilities, you alternate between maintaining your land ship by fixing systems, refueling, and keeping the engine running when needed, and going outside to remove obstructions to your path through short puzzle sections. The transition between these two is seamless. These aren't two different modes of gameplay, but the same mode in two different settings. Most lanes that have a focus on vehicles for transportation have the mechanics of using the vehicle and the mechanics of traversing on foot be entirely separate. So Lone Sail's approach is novel, but if you ask me if it's fun, no, not really. I'd even go so far as to say it's kind of bad, and I probably would be saying that outright if Lone Sails was much longer than its short 3 hour or so runtime. What cripples the game is repetition. Mechanics are so simple that there's not a lot of that can be done to present the player with new mechanics. The puzzles boil down to walking to the right place to jump on switches in the right order, none of those orders being particularly hard to deduce, leading to the gameplay blurring into a haze of monotony. Perhaps the most damning example of this is propelling your landship, which you do a lot of as it's your main means of transportation. So let's lay it out. At the center of the ship is the speed button. You press this until it clicks in to prime the engine. This causes a buildup of steam, which, if left unattended, will damage the landship. So you need to press this button before the gauge fills up to release the pressure, also providing a momentary speed boost. This slowly drains the fuel tank, this glowing blue circle in the middle of the ship. Keeping it full involves taking these containers, or really everything you find that is in an orange tank. Do not use the orange tanks. Do not use the orange tank. Into this lift here, and then pressing this button to fill up so you have fuel to burn when you press the speed button, while keeping an eye on the steam gauge and making sure you keep the fuel in the tank. Do you see? Do you see how this would get repetitive very, very fast? It's cool to figure out how to make the landship move, especially since the game leaves you to figure it out through its design and use. But once you do, it remains the same for the rest of the game. To be fair to Lone Sails, there are attempts to evolve the environmental puzzles as the game goes along. A particular set piece comes to mind when you board a colossal walker that runs on the same systems as your landship, just bigger. So you need to use your landship to help perform the same actions on a larger scale. That was really cool. And the game has a few other moments like that which stand out, but it never reaches the heights of puzzle games like Portal. When I step into a new chamber in Portal, I'm anticipating what new ways they're going to make me use the portal gun, or the cubes, or the gels. In Lone Sails, I rarely found myself puzzling how I was supposed to move forward in the same way. If that's the case, then why did I see it all the way through to the end? Why did I finish this bare bones, overly simplistic puzzle game much less feel the need to write an entire paper about it. Well, because other aspects of the game were able to overcome the drawbacks of the gameplay. That colossal walker I said was the gameplay highlight. It's a great microcosm of what really works about the game for me. As you go inside this colossal machine to make it work, you find a memorial service, presumably for the man who oversaw these machines. You see his grave, his face, his name, and the walls are decorated with murals of what these machines meant to this culture. It's clear from these, not to mention the various facilities for repairing and upgrading your landship, that these kinds of machines were a staple of the civilization that existed here before disappearing. And getting to see one of these wonders in action puts into sharp contrast all the broken technology you've seen throughout the game. Contrast is a storytelling tool that Lone Sails gets a lot of mileage out of. Most of the game is black, white, or grays, with red being one of the few colors to get much time on screen, mostly used to denote where your character is in the environment or technology, most of which you interact with to solve puzzles. It's important that your character is one of these red objects, as the game loves to pull back the camera to frame yourself as a tiny against your environment, isolated, indicating that maybe the purpose of this journey is to find someone. Far Lone Sails is great as a piece of visual storytelling, which has always been something that grabbed my attention. I think it was the wordless Calvin and Hobbes strips that introduced me to it as a kid, and ever since I've been drawn to games like Hyper Light Drifter, comics like Step by Bloody Step, or films like Mad God or the works of the Brothers Quay. These are works that entirely lack intelligible dialogue, some going so far as to abandon a conventional plot entirely, and to try and decode one out of them would be to miss the point. I have no idea exactly Mad God is about, but I do remember the ideas running through my head during all of its scenes. Like, for example, the one with the factory where the workers kill themselves trying to fulfill the whims of this massive TV screen that speaks in baby sounds. Yes, this is a real film. When I engage with this kind of art, I feel invited to step inside of it, to take the ideas and emotions the artist is providing and to see what I can make from it, how I can piece it together as a sort of co creative with the cartoonist, filmmaker, or game designer. And when I saw Lone Sails, I had a pretty good sense it was another addition to that group of works, works that really invite me to look into them and see what I can read from their raw imagery. I read a climate change parable in the imagery of Far Lone Sails. Parable, not direct allegory. A world of dried, exposed seabed is not directly applicable to rising sea levels from a warming atmosphere, but the game speaks to anxieties of a post climate catastrophe world, or at least it speaks to mine. There is something obviously wrong with Far Lone Sail's world. It is full of the constructs of an advanced civilization, but there's none of the people those constructs are there for. These houses house no one, these ships have no crew, these factories have no workers. It's a world that's seen a lot of loss. There's a clear tell that something happened to this civilization. As you wander through these abandoned structures, you can find traces of what was left behind. Piles of books, toys, a radio that plays music in certain locations, this silly little toy boat. There are also a few paintings scattered around, showing what this world looked like before the disaster took place, back when the seas were full. These paintings are some of the only times blue and green show up in the game's color palette. Outside of a few exceptions, most of the game is black, white, gray, and dull reds, which, again, are used to highlight the mechanical. Blues and greens are nature colors, and their absence for most of the playtime adds to the world feeling dead, or at least crippled. What exactly causes apocalypse? We're never told exactly, though the regular presence of extreme weather conditions, along with the ocean just being gone, do enough to fill in the blanks for me. And to be honest, I don't care about what specifically happened to make this world what it is, because solving some complicated ARG adjacent meta puzzle to get the game's lore that explains everything would take away from the emotional experience of experiencing this lonely world and wondering if I can find someone else in it. The game never quite provides answers to that, ending on a lighthouse surrounded by the wrecks of other landships, doing what you can to light a signal as the camera pulls out and fades to black and maybe written in code. The game keeps what drew me to it up to the end, leaving me to feel and feel through its ideas. I selected Far Lone Sales for this assignment in part because the game was something I had just played, and because what I took out of the game is something I want to see more videos about. Is it a good game? On a purely mechanical level, no. Far from broken, but far from what I would call enjoyable. There are dozens of puzzle games and platformers I would recommend ahead of this game in terms of being fun to play. But how many of these games show you this? Or this? Or this? How many of them invite you to stand on the deck of a post apocalyptic landship to watch a dying world go by and drink it in? How many use the mechanics of a puzzle platformer to communicate the operations of that landship? I can't say I have a lot of comparisons. The things that make the game interesting to me are not the things that would normally get praised in do the guns feel good? Yes, no reviews. And I've tried not to make this into one of those. In fact, if I'm doing this right, I've made a case why at least some of you watching this video would not enjoy this game. If you are one of those people, thanks for clicking on this video and hearing me out. I hope this video about me thinking about this game was interesting to you. Thanks for helping me get it the space I think it deserves.